Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Topher Morrison. Hi, Topher.
Hey, how are you?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm loving life right now. I'm out here in Tampa, Florida with my dog inside my studio, having a good day. So I'm ready to finish off my day with a great interview. Hopefully, let's cross our fingers that it's a good one.
Absolutely. Let's make it a good one, right? And I'm sure it's going to be a good one because of the topic and who you are and all the knowledge you're going to bring into this interview. So first of all, let me introduce you adequately. So you've been a professional speaker for 35 years, right? For over 35 years. So definitely you know how to speak. So that's why this interview is also going to be really good. Not only that, you wrote the book on public speaking. You specialize in creating award-winning pitches for business leaders who need to communicate with clarity and credibility. Yes. Okay, so that's another one. It's like, who doesn't need it, right? I mean, exactly. Our audience, the audience of this podcast are entrepreneurs, business owners that want to grow and scale their businesses. In order to do that, they have to know how to speak with clarity and credibility about what they're pitching and what they're all about. Yeah.
And most don't, by the way.
Most don't. Yeah, that's right. Well, we're going to dive into it because we have so much to cover. But first of all, I'd like to give a big shout out to Anna David for introducing us. I just interviewed her for my podcast for another episode so Anna helps entrepreneurs write books and basically be able to utilize their books in order to be able to put a message out there and actually get the publicity that they need from that book, as opposed to just writing a book and then not utilizing it. So she and I discussed that, and then I wrote a blog about it, like how to actually use the book in order to be able to drive business or get yourself as an authority in your field. And you've done also you've done your episode, you recorded a podcast episode with her as well.
We've done a ton of things together. Yeah. In fact, we're always looking for ways in which we can collaborate together. Yeah.
Great. Fantastic. All right. So now let's talk about the difference between public speaking and professional speaking.
Okay. Yeah. So ironically, my book is called The Book on Public Speaking, and I don't teach people how to be public speakers. That was intentional because most people don't see themselves as a professional speaker, right? I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody say, "Oh, I'm not a professional speaker. I'm just a salesperson." Or "I'm not a professional speaker. I just own a business," And I'm like, those are professional speakers. So here's the difference between the two, between a public speaker and a professional speaker. It's semantics, probably more than anything, but here's the distinction for me. Public speakers have to pay for the privilege to get on somebody's stage and speak. But professional speakers get paid for the honor to get up on stage and speak for a group of audience. So I'll give you an example. If you have to join a networking group, and in that networking group, you get up on stage and talk, you're a public speaker because you paid to join that group. But that group will sometimes bring in professional speakers to speak to the group. They didn't have to pay. In fact, they maybe bought them their dinner. That's a small payment, but it's a payment nonetheless, right? So anytime where your speaking could result in you making money, either at sales or recruiting or anything where you're persuading people to your cause, in my opinion, that's professional speaking. So the book is called The Book on Public Speaking intentionally, but very early on, it talks about the fact that you don't want to be a public speaker because that costs you money. You want to be a professional speaker because that's how you make more.
Absolutely. And, so there is also within the professional speaking, so there will be a differentiation between, you go on stage and you're being paid a lot of money to go on stage, but also there is the professional speaking of getting the money after, which that's the point you were saying is like, as a business owner, because a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs. They are growing, scaling their business, and they go, okay, well, I want to be a speaker, but I really think that they're a speaker already, because you have to be a speaker, right?
Yeah, look at it this way. If you own a business and you have to do a staff meeting, and the success of that staff meeting is going to determine the productivity of your employees, and the productivity of your employees will determine how much that company makes, congratulations, you're a professional speaker, and you damn well better understand what are the techniques that allow that group to get motivated and fired up versus discouraged and brought down.
Absolutely. All right. So, in my podcast, I always like to create processes so people, our listeners, can actually take it and use it and apply it, right? So let's talk about your advice, your best advice in terms of professional speaking. So as an entrepreneur, when you're talking to, well, there are different audiences, right? Different publics, but how would you differentiate the difference in the speaking to different audiences, and what are the actions that you would recommend that they will take?
Sure. I think probably the most important thing would be to think about your audience, the people who would be watching or listening to this. They're going to be having to deliver a business pitch at some point in time in their profession, right? Whether they're at a cocktail party holding a drink and somebody walks up and asks the inevitable question, what do you do? They have to have a response for that, which is thought out and prepared and sounds articulate and creates clarity and, most important, even believability. And unfortunately, most people don't do that. And the other mistake I see is that people have one way of communicating what they do, regardless of the situation. So the opposite is they do have a memorized pitch, but it's the same pitch no matter what situation. And I don't think that's proper as well. So I have a system for pitching where I look at pitching as 5 different places. You've got your elevator pitch, your party pitch, your sales pitch, your investor pitch, and then your media pitch. And so each of those have a different structure and components that are involved in order to communicate what it is you do with clarity and credibility. And we can talk about all of them or whichever one you want to.
I love to start at the beginning. Elevator pitch.
Elevator pitch. Got it. So there's 3 things that really need to be communicated inside of an elevator pitch. And it's almost easier to talk about what not to do in an elevator pitch, because I see so many mistakes in it. The first mistake that people make with an elevator pitch is they just wing it. And if there's a surefire way to sacrifice money in business, it's winging it. No professional wings it, right? And so the biggest problem is because people don't take time out of their day to practice a pitch, they end up making it up on the fly every single time. And what happens is sometimes they strike out, sometimes they hit a home run. And they might get excited that they hit a home run, but because they've never practiced it, they don't even know what they did compared to the last time that was a strikeout. So they can't duplicate success. So it's important to have a pitch that is rehearsed on a regular basis. So when people ask you that question, hey, what do you do? You've got a response that in less than 15 seconds, you can belt out something really powerful and clean. And there's 3 things that I think should be in that pitch. So we could do this a couple of different ways. We could have a little fun. I could ask you what you do for a living, and Adi, you could tell me.
Let's
pitch,
do that.
Right? And then
Okay.
we could modify it if you want to. That's up to you, or I can tell you what I do. Yeah.
Okay, ask me.
Adi, what do you do?
So I work with fast-growing companies that are lacking consistency.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Perfect. I love it, by the way. So now could we make that even better? There's a couple of things we could do, but it's strong as it is, right? Let me tell you what worked and what doesn't typically work. What I liked about your pitch is that it was straight, matter of fact, and simple. And too many times people try to overcomplicate their pitch because they want to sound impressive. And they go down one of 2 routes. One is they try to be cutesy and unique and fun. And that often rarely works. It just kind of turns people off, right? And the other thing that they do, in fact, I'll give you an example of this. I met somebody one time. When I asked them what they did, they introduced, and I'm not going to mention their name, but they said that they were a cranial prosthetic engineer. Now, any idea, by the way, what a cranial prosthetic engineer is?
No.
It sounds impressive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was immediately intimidated. I was thinking, wow, this is like a neurosurgeon or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is a neurosurgeon. What did they do?
I had to dig a little bit, but I found out that she designed wigs.
She designed what?
Wigs. She made wigs, cranial prosthetics. And I'm like,
okay.
Just don't make, like anytime you pitch, and it makes the listener have to think, that's probably a bad pitch. And I had to really think, like, what is a cranial prosthetic engineer? And that's not what you want your audience. You want your audience to go, I get it. I know what you do. And she could have just said, I sell wigs, right? So don't try to be cutesy and say that you're a transportation specialist who is an expert in getting high-powered executives from where they're at in life to where they want to. Just say you sell cars, right? Just keep it simple, right? If you're a consultant, you're a consultant. If you're a trainer, you're a trainer. And so I always say, try to get out, what is that one thing of familiarity? Like if you were to Google search somebody for your profession, what would that label be? And a lot of people resist that because they go, but I'm so much more than a trainer. I'm so much more than a consultant. I'm so much more than an engineer. I do so much more. And I go, yeah, I get it. But if you try to convey all those things that you do, they're gonna remember anything. So it's better to pick one thing that they can remember, right? So for example, when people ask me what I do, I say, hey, my name's Topher. I'm a consultant. I just say I'm a consultant. It's easy. My name's Topher. I'm a consultant, right? Now, there's tons of different kind of consultants that are out there. So how do you make that stand out? Because you still want to stand out. And that's the second piece. And I think that's something we could do a little bit with your pitch again, by the way, is we could actually go one step further, make it even more powerful. And that is, you want to throw out what Daniel Priestley, the author of Key Person of Influence, and a guy that would be a great guest for this show, if you've not already interviewed him, I will definitely make the introduction. He calls it your claim to fame. And I love it, by the way. So your claim to fame is, what is that thing that you do inside your profession that is better than anybody else? So for me, I might say, hi, my name's Topher, I'm a consultant. Or hi, my name's Topher, I'm a trainer, right? Even a more basic word. I specialize in creating award-winning pitches for business leaders that need to communicate with clarity and credibility. Boom, that's my specialty, right? And if you, and because what happens is if you tell somebody, this is the box that I'm in, that you think you know everything about, but here's what I do that's really special, it creates that uniqueness without being cutesy, so to speak, right? So, Adi, say what you did again when I said, what do you do for a living? Go and give me your answer again. And I'll see if
I'm a consultant, and we work with fast-growing companies that are lacking consistency by documenting their processes and procedures and making sure they're implemented.
Home run, right? That's perfect. You gave the consultant, and then you talked about that specialty. The only other thing that I might change on that one is I try to encourage my clients to avoid passive words. And passive words would be things like work, help. Help is the most common one. I hear that all the time in service-driven companies. They go, we help people, the blah, blah, blah. And you know, when you think about the most inspirational entrepreneurs that are out there, I would challenge you to ever hear them say that they help people. Like, you don't hear Tim Cook get up there and say, we help people calculate, we help people organize their day by creating great computers, right? They just doesn't say help. It's just kind of weak, right? Work is a little bit better than help, but you could probably get rid of that and replace it with a more active word, right? So for example, I don't say I help people write their pitches. I say I create award-winning pitches for business leaders that need to communicate with clarity and credibility.
So we create processes and procedures for fast-growing companies that are lacking consistency.
Yeah, boom, right? That's already stronger, right? My name's Adi. I'm a consultant. I create systems and processes for business owners. And then the only other thing you do is you could, if you wanted to, you could even create a more powerful picture for what those systems create, right? And I don't know what that would be, but it might be something like, we create systems and procedures to allow business owners to stay focused on their strategy in business and not get sucked into the tactical day-to-day.
Or to grow and scale. Yeah, I mean, you know, and that's what in our website, like we create, I mean, it's really what I usually say is we create, document, and implement processes and procedures so fast-growing companies lacking consistency can grow and scale. How's that?
Yeah. By the way, let me ask you, I don't want to turn the tables and turn this into an interview about Adi, but I'm fascinated. Do you have like a software that you've developed to do that, or is it more about the procedures and how to get that structured in place, and then you're system agnostic?
We use software, but we didn't develop it. So we use different types of softwares that are out there for software documentation, software implementation. We are the ones who create the content. Perfect.
So there's another guy I'll introduce you to named Alexis Kingsbury out in the UK who has a company called Air Manual. You would love him because his whole software is about online policies and procedures, really specific for companies that have to have checklists to make sure that they don't miss anything. It's perfect for that. Yeah.
Fantastic. So we're doing this interview and I'm already getting all this introduction. That's great. So let's go back to you, Topher, because this is highlighting you. But I love that. So you said three things. Did you cover all three? You're a consultant. You say what you do. what you
yes.
specialize in, and what's the third thing?
The third thing is the thing that we do automatically, which is make sure you tell them your name. But there's a key to this as well, especially for people like you and I that have unusual names, right? Because we have said our own names for our whole life, we take for granted how it sounds, and we often don't articulate the name of our name or our company's name as effectively as we could, right? So what ends up happening is somebody goes like, hi, my name's Topher Morrison, I'm with Personify. And they just throw it out too fast, right? So I always recommend that people really over-articulate their name and pause a little bit so people can get it. Hi, my name's Topher. My company is called Personify. We're a training consultancy firm. We specialize in developing award-winning pitches for business leaders that need to communicate with clarity and credibility. But I really pause there that Topher, because Topher is such a weird name, right? So if I just go, my name's Topher Morrison, I'm with Personify, it's too fast, too quick, right? So my name is Topher. And sometimes I even go, my name's Topher, like tofu, but make it furry, right? Now maybe throw something like that if they go,
oh, I say it all the time. My name is Adi, like the shoe Adidas, but just the first three letters.
Yeah, perfect, right? And then they get it. Yeah. So
I love it. Great advice.
Yeah, your name, your title, your generic term, and then your claim to fame, as Dan Priestley would call it.
Beautiful. Okay, that was the elevator pitch. Number 2.
The party pitch.
The party pitch. Let's talk about a party pitch.
Yeah, okay. So the party pitch is something that would probably take us 4 hours to go through, but we'll hit the highlights of it.
Let's do the highlights, yeah.
Yeah, so a party pitch is designed to answer the basic main questions that people are going to ask. So the main question that you're going to hear at a networking event or a party, whether it's a picnic or networking event, is what do you do? Now, we've already handled that through the elevator pitch, right? So the first step in the party pitch is the elevator pitch. That's the clarity piece. Once you've answered that all-important question of what do you do, the next question which surfaces in everybody's mind, maybe not consciously, but it's subconsciously sitting in the back of their mind is, are you any good at it? Right? That's the next question. Like, just think about it. Anytime you met somebody and you find out what they do, don't you kind of size them up? You kind of want to know, are they good? Are they not? You having a podcast like this, you probably are always got your antenna out for potential really good guests. But the last thing you want to do is get a crap guest who has no credibility, right? So your antennas are up, they introduce themselves, you find out what they do, and then you're almost going, would that person be a good guest? That's another question for, are you any good at it? Because if they're not, they wouldn't be a good guest. So the question that comes up right after what do you do is, are you any good? And you need to find a way to answer that. And I'll give your audience a great technique for this one. There is one thing that makes anything more credible. And that is, oddly enough, numbers. The more numbers you can put in your credibility piece, the more credible you will become. And there's a reason for that. Adi, if I tell you that I've been a professional speaker for the majority of my life, would that lend to you a certain level of credibility? Like, would you assume then that I'm good at what I do?
100%.
Yeah. But if I were to say, I've been a professional speaker for the past 35 years, can you feel how that's different? Like that's more weighty, that's more grounded than the majority of my life. Granted, the majority of my life might even be technically a bigger number or more powerful, but it doesn't feel that way because words are subjective, numbers are objective. And when
you also look younger. So, with 35 years, but you do. So, that's where
the lighting and the makeup, that's all.
But it's kind of like then it becomes the people's evaluation as opposed to you making the statement, which will stick with them that it was over 35 years. Yeah, I mean, I do the same. I've been doing it for almost 3 decades. Absolutely. People ask, well, when did you start doing it? Well, I've been doing it for my whole career. So I understand that. Okay, so that is anything else? Because I do want to cover all of them on a high level. So anything else for the party line that you feel like the listeners need to know?
Well, from a credibility piece, I try to get out 3 numbers is an ideal. So if you could talk about maybe how many years you've done it, how many customers you've worked with, how much money you've generated or created for your clients or something, those are the kind of numbers. But if you don't have those things, you could even go about you could say, and I founded my company in 2010. right? There's a number. It's grounded versus saying I've been around for a long time. So try to get as many numbers as you can. That builds up that credibility piece. The next question, then after you answer the question, what do you do? And are you any good at it? The next question in the back of somebody's mind is, do you get me? Do you even like, would what you do work for me? Like, do you really get my problems, right? And so any good pitch where you're trying to get into the mind of your customer, you want to be able to clearly articulate what their problem is, right? And the biggest mistake I've seen with people is they use really too aggressive and salesy language. Right? Let me give you an example of this. So Adit, let's say we meet at a party. You ask me what I do, right? And it's a conversation. It's not a presentation, right? So I just throw out my elevator pitch, right? And I just go, I'm a trainer. I create award-winning pitches for business leaders that want to communicate with clarity and credibility. You go, oh, that's amazing. And I go, what do you do? And then you do your pitch, right? That's how a conversation goes in a party pitch. It's not like a presentation. And then you say, well, how long have you been doing that? By the way, how long have you been doing that is code for, are you any good at it? Right? You're unconsciously looking for those numbers, right? And say, well, I don't know if I'm any good at it, but I've been speaking professionally for 35 years and I've helped generate over 10 million in award-winning pitches in terms of funding, right? You know, and I can throw out some pitches. So I'm starting to get the hang of it, right? You can even joke and play around with it, right? But then the next question you're going to know is, would it be good for you? Now imagine if I were to shift tone and all of a sudden start saying you. Notice how this feels, right? And you know what? The biggest problem that I'm sure you face, Eddie, as a consultant, is trying to communicate clearly all of the different things that you do in such an effective way that they get it and they will actually want to work with you. And another problem that you probably have is that you don't rehearse your pitch long enough or hard enough to where it's memorized and it just comes off the tip of your tongue effortless and orderly. And another problem that you probably have is that because you don't practice it, you have inconsistency in your pitch. By now, I've probably turned you off, right? Because I'm kind of in your face going, you.
I don't like it.
Saying you, right? I always say, talk about the client's problems in third person and it makes it less resistant. So I might say something like this, go, you know what, one of the biggest challenges that I see a lot of business owners make is they never take the time to rehearse their pitch. And as a result, they end up winging it. And when they wing it, they sometimes hit a home run, they sometimes strike out. And even if they do hit a home run, they don't know what they did to hit that home run, so they can't create that success consistently. And that becomes a big frustration for a lot of people. Now, when I say that, you're nodding your head unconsciously, right? You're going, yes, because I'm talking about other people, not talking about you. I'm not in your face, right? That's just too much, right?
It's also like, Topher, in my opinion, too, I might be the best public speaker that you ever met, and you do not want to come across as condescending or assuming, because the last thing that we like is when somebody does not really get, then I will go, oh, this guy doesn't get me at all because I think I'm good, but maybe there is something I can improve upon and maybe I can use you to help me do that.
Yeah. I promise if you start saying you a lot in a pitch, they will slowly back away at the party and then start looking around going, oh, excuse me, I have to go over here. And that's how you know you've kind of turned them off. So yeah, always use third person when talking about the client's problems. It's probably theirs, but you don't want to point it out that well. Yeah.
Good. Anything else on the party?
Well, there's a couple of other things. The other one is how do you, so if in fact you go, does this person get me? And then you're subconsciously nodding your head going, yeah, I'm guilty of that. Then the next natural question would be, can you help me, right? So you'd want to know what the solution is. This is an interesting one. When you start talking about the solution inside a party pitch, you want to tell people what you do and how you do it without actually telling them what you do and how you do it. Because if you actually tell them how you do it, it's way too much detail at a party, right? You're like over talking them and you're boring them. Like at any point in time, if you feel like you need to open up your phone and start going through some slides on your phone, that's too much detail, right? So it's just keep it at high level. And I always say that what works best is if you can take what it is that you do and turn it into a methodology, right? So for example, Adi, you probably have, whether you've systemized, and I'm sure you have, by the way, because you're a systems expert. So you're probably already consciously aware of it, but you'd be surprised how many, especially service-driven companies, have never sat back and said, how many steps do I go through with my client to fix their problem? You probably already know this as a systems person. You know that, for example, there's like an interview process, there's an assessment process, there's a creation process, there's an edit. So you probably already know what that is. But most people don't, right? So I find when you can communicate what you do in a methodology, it makes it far more believable. And yet they still don't know what you do, right? So it might be something like, well, through my 3-step methodology, I create award-winning pitches for people that are easy to memorize, fun to deliver, and natural when they come across, right? Or something like that. And I haven't really told them anything, but I've told them that I have a methodology. And if you can throw out that, it works really, really well.
Wow. Okay, good.
One more.
Yeah, one more.
This is the most important one. But if you deliver it right up front, you freaked them out. And by the way, it may not always come up. The thing about a party pitch is we have 8 specific things that we talk about, but they may not always come up, and they might come up in a different order. But the one that is absolutely the most important, especially when you transition from a party pitch into a sales presentation, and we'll talk about that in a minute, is why you do what you do, the compelling why. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Simon Sinek, Start With Why, and I love his TED Talk video. I think it's one of the most popular TED Talks out there. And he talks about how if you start with why, not with start with how or what, it's much more emotional. And he's 100% right in a sales pitch. But if you start with why in a social environment, you might just freak them out, right? Could you imagine? Yeah, could you imagine you and I at a party, Eddie, and you come up to me and you go, oh, what do you do for a living? And I go, well, before I tell you what I do, let me tell you why I do it. I learned at a very early age that words create your reality. Like before I go any further, I've probably already freaked you out. You're like, whoa, too deep.
Hello, Topher, great meeting you. Oh, sorry. I'll get back to you. Let me go.
Yeah. However, in a sales presentation, when you sit down, the rapport's already been established. They know why you're here. It's perfectly appropriate to start off with, before we go into the ins and outs, I'd love to tell you a little bit about why I do what I do, right? That's cool. That makes sense. But the problem that I see is that most people, when they come up with their why, they sell themselves short and they don't have the courage to be personal. I think a why needs to be deeply personal and really almost vulnerable, right? Like go ahead and show the side of yourself that really shows why it is that you get up early and stay up late and why you're so passionate about this. I was working with a gentleman today who has a jiu-jitsu school in Dubai. And when I got to the why, and like every entrepreneur, they kind of struggle with that. They go through a little bit of story and I just sit back and I keep asking him questions. At one point in time, he just lights up and he goes, it's so active because I wrote it for him this morning, right? So he just lit up and he goes, well, he goes, I was really bad in sports my whole life. Like I tried everything and I wasn't good at any of it. And it made me really insecure. And I think that insecurity came into other parts of my life. Like I wouldn't stand up for myself and I wouldn't speak up when I knew that I could speak up, or if I saw an injustice, I'd let it fly by. And it wasn't until I found jujitsu, specifically Gracie jujitsu, that all of a sudden I was really good at it. And then my confidence started to shift. And then I felt that confidence went into other areas of my life, right? And here he doesn't even know. He's just lighting up and I go, that's your why. I go, dude, that is your why. And so we wrote his whole pitch out, and now his pitch, he gets to his why, and he goes, the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because I struggled my whole life with athletics. I wasn't good at anything. I mean, I tried it all and I failed miserably. And that insecurity transferred into other areas of life. I think we've all been in cases or situations where we could have spoke up. We should have spoke up. We didn't, because we were a little shy, a little insecure. And that was me. And it wasn't until I got my 20s that I started learning martial arts and jiu-jitsu. I was really good at it. And all of a sudden that gave me that boost of confidence. And I'm on this planet to make sure that those kids get that level of confidence that I got in my late 20s, but they can get it in their teens or even earlier. I mean, isn't that what all parents want for their kids? Right. And like, it's so emotional, right? And like, if you were contemplating who you hire to train your kid martial arts, you're going to hire that guy over the guy. Yeah. So anyway, you got to have a nice emotional story behind what it is that you do. And everybody has it. You may not be aware of it. You might have to have somebody interview you and ask you some questions, but it's absolutely there. Yeah.
But that would be the last thing in the party, not the first thing, which I can totally see.
Yeah.
But what question does it answer? Like if somebody, you in a party or in a social situation, when do you actually go into that story, that emotional story?
Yeah. Eddie, I'm curious, what got you into that?
Well,
that's there. That's the question, right? It's almost teeing up the door to go, oh, well, what got you into it? And now you've talked about your compelling why. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Topher, this is incredible. So now I know we have 3 more, but we really covered a lot during this episode. Okay. If people want to know more, because they do, I know right now they go, I want to know the rest of it. I want to listen to Topher, I want to read his books, how would they find out more? Where would they go to find out about the other three, which is the sales, the investor, and the...
Sure.
Which one is the other one? You have the sales?
Media pitch. Yeah.
Media pitch.
Yeah.
You have to hear all of that. Where do they go?
Yeah. They can go to tophermorrison.com. They can also just go to Amazon. I mean, if you Google Topher Morrison, there's not that many Topher Morrisons out there. So I'm pretty sure that it'll all pop up. But yeah, they can go to tophermorrison.com. They can go to Amazon and search for my book. If they just search my name in Amazon, it'll pull up all the books that I've written as well. Pretty easy. Yeah, not hard to find me.
Excellent. So I highly recommend to go get your book, to read it, and I've been to your website. It's really good, has a lot of resources, and people should definitely go, and I will include it in your show notes, because you definitely know what you're talking about. And I believe that that will make a huge difference in our listeners' lives to actually understand just that alone. Okay, the elevator pitch, the party pitch, we've all been in those circumstances when after that you go, oh, I wish I knew what to say. So I just lost this opportunity, or just even if it's not an opportunity, just to make yourself known, because you might be connected to somebody, or just like feel good about yourself that you were actually able to communicate who you are. And definitely in terms of sales, investing, media pitch, all of that is super important. Topher, I can't thank you enough for being a guest on this podcast and sharing.
My pleasure.
Yeah, sharing this information. And we might do another episode where we'll actually cover the rest, so we can actually have it like as a complete series.
Anytime.
But in the meanwhile, our listeners should go and search out your website and look for your books and read them. And thank you very much.
You bet. Terrific. Thanks so much, Izzy.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.